Hi, and welcome. It's Michigan's AutoTalk Podcast. This is, believe it or not, episode number 52. We remind you that every episode of Michigan's AutoTalk is all of us celebrating the automobile, everything automotive. And, by the way, we're about helping and supporting you, the car and truck owners across our great state of West Michigan, our great state of Michigan. We happen to be in West Michigan, in Grand Rapids, to be specific, because we have listeners. Believe it or not, we have listeners for this podcast all over the world. We're on Spotify, Google Podcast, the iHeartRadio app as well. It's my pleasure to introduce the stars of the show, Al Schwinkendorf, John Puhek, and
Howdy.
Howdy, guys. We have to bring back the amazing, the one and only. He ought to have his own cape and, magic wand. He is the one and only Ed Delamar. And he does have a magic wand.
When camouflage so he can go duck hunting. Hi, Ed. Okay, so here's the deal on Ed. Ed's like
he's a car whisperer.
I've always called him an independent car salesman. And back in the day, I don't know if he does anymore or not, he used to stock used cars in dealers' lots because my buddy Danny Pfeiffer, every spring he could sell a Jaguar and a couple Vets and stuff like that. So he'd lean on somebody like Ed to come in there and take care of it. And when people come in and they're looking to buy a used car, the problem that most people have is they have a salesman who works for a particular dealership and they're stuck with what that dealer has on the floor. Now, if you go see Ed, the world's your oyster because he's everywhere. The dude can remember 400 or 500 cars in his head with details. And so the only question I have for everybody I ever sent to him was, do you know what you want? And if you know what you want in the used car, you contact Ed Delamar and you win. If you don't know, it's just a mess for both of you. So go out and do your homework and figure out what you want and then go see Ed because you're not locked into one dealership. He searches the world. So, and I love that, Ed, because we've got so many customers that are so happy with your service throughout the years. And I bought cars from you and it's all been awesome.
Well, I sure appreciate you having me on your show. And the good things you say about me is very respectful. I appreciate that.
Oh, but it's the truth. I mean, and I know this, which is funny because I'm going to say this and I'm going to embarrass him just a little bit. One day he went up to our local veterinarian to get his bird dog checked up or done whatever, and the keys got locked in the Jeep. And I went out there and we had quite a long conversation when I was trying to break into the Jeep so he could drive out of there. That particular veterinarian.
You got a pretty good memory.
I mean, I do. I've got an awesome memory. Not as good as yours, but close. But Ed, I got to tell you, that particular doctor went to the auto show, got a brochure for a Chevy Suburban, picked out colors, options, everything he wanted. About 3-4 months later, he went to Ed and said, this is what I want. And he called me up and he goes, son of a bitch, 15 days later, Ed calls me up and he found the thing. It's got 15,000 miles on it. It's only 60% of the value I would have had to pay if I went down to the dealer and bought it new. And it's the exact vehicle that I wanted. And that's what makes people happy.
Well, it definitely has to do with a lot of connections, a lot of research. And in today's world, people are getting more and more used to buying things online. But I will still say you need somebody that can sit there and look at it, feel it, touch it, smell it, and know where it's coming from.
Well, we know that because you're the ultimate pro. But what are the things that, because we have a ton of them right now, and people are really freaked out about going and buying cars because the stuff on dealerships lots has 80,000 miles more than it did 4 years ago. What's your best advice for people for shopping for cars?
Well, what I would do, the first thing I would do is think about why I need this car. What is the reason I need a new car? Am I going to pull a boat? Do I worry about gas mileage? Is there a certain price range I have to be in to budget myself? And I think people nowadays are budgeting themselves more than they used to because of the economy, inflation, gas prices, and all that.
Yeah, and I think that's the one nice thing, like you just said, all those check marks when you're seeing advertisements for, car vending machines, and you can do all this shopping online, when you actually have somebody to sit down and actually talk to you and say, hey, what are you actually going to do with it? I would love to have a Ferrari. Is it practical? No, it's going to get stuck in the snow, all this stuff. And that may be lost with most of the online, I don't go to auctions, but like you get that like bitter frenzy where, like, oh yeah, let's go here, and you get the kind of stuck in the atmosphere of the, pumping yourself up type deal. And to have somebody, to have somebody actually sit down and be like, okay, look, what are you actually going to do with this? Do you really need that? Do you really gonna, justify this?
No.
Yeah. And so
they don't have a clue.
Yeah. And so when you've got somebody like Ed that can sit down and okay, what are you going to do? Is it really worth it? This is what you want? Okay. Then once you narrow it down, he just snipers it out and away you go.
Phil found
like I was saying earlier, though, I think the market has driven people's opinions of their car purchases because of they're going to get a tighter budget. A tighter budget's not, people in the United States are not going to drive cars down the highway that are junk, nor are they going to drive a car that's $60,000 and they can buy one for $30,000. So now they got to weigh that out and then make that decision from there.
Well, that's the tough part of your job, right? They want the $60,000 car, but they only want to pay you $30,000 for it. I mean, that's just life. I got to believe in your world. Phil found a thing on the internet, and it said that it talked about the average life of a car on a new car dealership, and the Telluride is really popular vehicle. And I read something last week that said that vehicles are up 40% versus last year, but then they broke it down, and what's up is minivans, because there's people with families, and what, they're not sexy, they're not cool, but they're practical. I could give you probably 15 names of people who, when I met them, they had the kids that played soccer and did stuff like that, and they had the minivan. And then as soon as those kids graduated and went to college and they could afford it because they're paying for college, they go get some little two-seater sexy vehicle and say, well, that's not quite my style. So then they go buy like a Grand Cherokee or an Explorer, Tahoe or something like that. And then they decide that's not so great. And then they get into their 60s and they go back to a minivan because it's front-wheel drive. They go good through the snow. They're easy to load groceries into. You can haul all your friends to go to knitting class, and they just are what they are. And the minivans, they said, went up 45%, and the manufacturers just simply aren't building them anymore. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. You got a Chrysler. The Ford one is more like a utility vehicle than it is a passenger vehicle, although you can get it that way. And the Chevy and the Chrysler ones are so ugly, I wouldn't be seen dead.
Yeah, no, I don't even think they have one.
Well, you got to understand, too, that the manufacturers are
what's
changing.
the most popular thing on your lot that you can stock that people will buy?
It depends on the time of the year.
Okay.
Right now, and it depends on the economy. It depends on the gas mileage. It depends on people's needs. I think people are becoming a little more conservative and less emotional and more practical about their purchases versus they were 5 years ago. I think now gas is a huge thing. Yeah, I think gas is a huge thing. I think people's stocks have gone down. I think they're looking at things differently because it was excuse my French, but it was hell's bells and peanut shells because the stock was going up and they were making money and not having to do anything for it. Hey, let's do something with this extra 20,000. Let's do something with this extra 20 grand we just got. Well, let's go buy this car. You know what? We have a car. Well, let's go get a sports car. All that stuff is very impulsive things to buy. I think the impulsive part of it is coming down.
Yeah, that's a good point. Whoa. Ed, I want to ask you in terms of your searches, and I'm going to go both ways on this. If you had to say, these are the cars that people are almost always asking me about. Maybe most popular couple, 2 or 3. Do you have this is what I get asked almost every week or every other week. Do you have a couple that seem to rise to the top on a consistent basis?
It depends on the market. And the market right now is gas orientated. But
Okay.
I will say probably 3 top cars that I get demands for. I'm talking about for the general public: Toyotas, Hondas, and third row vehicles.
And if you sell any of those to anybody, you never get any complaints or they come
Yeah,
back.
exactly,
I almost
yeah.
guarantee, right? Toyotas and Hondas, it's just what it is.
Bulletproof.
Yeah. And
Yeah, well, it depends. When you go to buy one of those, you have to look at the price, the service record, how much maintenance has this thing had, has the person taken care of it? And then you go, well, this might not be the cheapest one, but it's the one that's been the best taken care of.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yep.
Is there something on the other end where you go, you hear that car and you go, I'm never going to find that, or is it going to be a bear to find? Is there one vehicle or a couple of vehicles that are really a tough find for Ed Delamar?
Yeah, under $6,000, low mileage Honda or Toyota.
That's like a unicorn, man.
That's a unicorn. Yep.
You asked me the question, I'm giving you an answer.
Well said. And that is
Fair enough.
Al, that's Al and John. That's why we love Ed. Straight answer, no BS, and that is true. You, especially in this used cars market, I know because I like to look. You cannot find a good used Toyota or Honda for under $6,000. It's going to come with a set of problems, and that's why Verburg Automotive is in business for reasons like that. You're going to pay a little bit more, and do you worry about those cars, Ed, with 180 or 200 or 250,000 miles? I mean, those cars will go forever, but you got to wonder at some point,
That's where you got to go back and start looking at your maintenance.
Good point.
You look at the maintenance, you're going to know this thing's got some maintenance, so it's going to have a little more longevity. And you have to weigh that out versus the price. If you're going to deal with something that's that inexpensive, let's talk about a $7,000-$8,000 car or less, you're going to give up something. You're going to give up either miles or maybe a scratch and dent versus the maintenance. I'd rather have the maintenance over cosmetic.
Exactly. Like the saying goes, chrome won't get you home. I'll take a rust bucket beater that I know will crank over every morning when I go to work versus a really fancy car that, I got to hope and pray that it'll start every morning.
That's the balancing act that you have to deal with.
The one thing that's always surprised me about Ed is vehicles. I mean, he knows them. He deals with them all the time. He drives them. He's all about that. But they're like a commodity. Like he could be a lemon merchant. I've got this truck full of lemons. He's got a truck full of cars.
Yep.
His own instincts. He doesn't buy junk. It's a car, and it's just weird to me because to me, like that car, don't care about that car. To him, it's a car. It's got this many miles on it. It's got these options on it. It's this color. It's this, that, and that. It's worth so much, and there you go. Again, that's why I said if you know what you want and you want to buy a used car, call Ed Delamar. If you don't know what you want, go do your homework and figure it out because and this is not a slam against Ed, but he doesn't have time or patience to go teach you what you need in a car. You know what I'm saying?
If you're going to come correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you know what you want, man, dude, take care of you.
Ed, it's now April. Any final words of wisdom to people who are shopping for a used vehicle at this point?
At this point, actually I was today, I was at a Toyota store because I like to buy Toyota trade-ins. And I was shocked when I walked in there. It was 70% empty.
Huh.
You're talking about the parking lot.
The parking lot where the used cars should be was 70% empty.
I'll tell you, the Hyundai Kia place on 28th Street, they've got an electric sign up there, and it says we have a huge inventory of used cars. And the ones that are parked up there have got a repair tag, with the number 369 or whatever.
Yeah.
Customers and park them up front to make it look like they got something. It's crazy. Now, your lot's fairly full, though, isn't it? Because you're just out buying.
You know what? I've been really blessed to keep the connections that I've had since 1978. So I've got some of these guys that give me first choice of their trade-ins. And like, for example, I've got one guy who owns 16 stores, but he doesn't keep cars that are over 40,000 miles and more than 3 years old. I've been very blessed to have that connection and get some very nice cars all the way through COVID and everything. I got those cars. So yeah, it's been a real blessing for me.
Good. Thank you so much for coming on. We're going to do it again in the future. We love it. Have a great April. Sell a lot of cars.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks again, man.
Always appreciate the time, Ed. Thank you so much. Such a man of wisdom and just cutting right to the point.
He's larger than life.
Yeah,
he's huge.
Yeah, I love the fact that he's going to call it like it is, and there are that wisdom on the Toyotas and Hondas. I mean, it's so basic, yet so many people ignore it.
Yep,
and
exactly.
It's because they want the cars, or if it's somebody who has to have a Volkswagen GTI, but I won't name names.
Chuckle.
You know what I love about Ed is that, like he said, 78's when he started. He's a little bit older than Phil and I, but the dude rolls with the changes. Mm-hmm. And there's very, very few old timers out there. They'll roll with the changes until they're in their late 50s, early 60s, and then they just stop and say, I'm not going to do it anymore. He's as much on top of it as he was in 1982 when I bought my first car from him.
And you know what, Al, you know what the secret of Ed Delamar is? I don't think he would care if I said this. I'm guessing he is over 70. Let's just put it that way. Late 60s, over 70. Mm-hmm. You know why he does what he does? He gets an absolute kick out of it. He loves getting out of bed every morning.
Loved it since day one, and he still does, despite the stress and the bad things and all that. That's his thing.
And that is his thing. And that is a business, John, that business will eat people up and spit them out into four ways sideways.
Exactly. And that's the one thing where you can kind of, I've been doing this for a little bit, but you can always kind of tell the guys that know what they're talking about and the guys that don't, they just are kind of pretending or whatever. And he's one of those guys where when he talks, you shut up and listen. Don't interject. He's done it all. He's seen just quiet. See if you can peck away at some piece of knowledge and try to retain it, because he just has that innate ability, whether it be born or developed or whatever, but you just hush, listen.
Yeah. He could get in the motorhome and travel the country and teach others and
exactly.
do very well for himself, but he loves what he's doing. He loves working with his employees, the salesmen. He's not, if you just look back from when Phil and I were young in the 70s and stuff like that, and how a used car salesman was portrayed, that's not Ed.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, not at all.
Ed used to.
Not at all.
Danny Pfeiffer, Orson Co. Pontiac, Harvey Cadillac, all that, he'd go in there and trade cars around. So he stocked their inventories and stuff. He might still, I don't know, but I know the guy, you tell him I got a customer that's looking for a white Mazda 626 with a blue interior and a 2.4 turbo. And then
2 weeks, boom.
10 days later, I get a phone call. Well, I'm out here in Kansas City and I just found this one. It's got 20,000 miles on it. Looks pretty good, this and that. If you think they might want it, I'll drive it back. And if they don't buy it, no big deal, because I can sell it. And that's Ed Delamar. And he's a treat. He's the most stand-up used car salesman in the entire world. He blows the stereotype away.
He sure does. And he has a dealership, I know, on 28th Street and Clyde Park, because I've been there before, and I'm trying to think.
Yeah, it's right where you get off 131.
If you are Direct Auto Source, thank you for saying that. We'll give them a plug and a shout out. Most importantly, if you live in the greater Grand Rapids area, or for that matter, guys, anybody who lives within 50 miles, this is worth a trip to get to know Ed, especially as he said, and we all know this, the used car inventory right now at most dealers is decimated. And it has been for a long time. So if you take one thing from this episode, plan accordingly. This is probably going to be as hard as finding a good house and not paying $95,000 or $150,000 over sticker, which people are still doing, by the way, in Grand Rapids, which is insane. But that's
and the most important thing is if you go to his website and see what he has in inventory, probably 3/4 of that is already sold. Probably 3/4 of what he's got on the lot hasn't been entered yet because they're flipping that quick. Unlike most places, that doesn't matter. Contact them and tell them what you want, and they'll go find it. And he's got connections with dealers all over the country, and he can, he's got some turd whatever Suburban he can't get rid of her because the gas mileage is so poor, and you want this Camry hybrid or something, he'll swap and wheel and deal and stuff and take care of you. So don't be too concerned about what's on the website. That's not he's, how do I want to say it, his wingspan is very, very wide. He can find you something anywhere.
Well, that is going to put the wraps on episode 52. By the way, if you didn't listen to our last episode 51, some great wisdom, great conversation with Jeremy from Garage Kept Motors, the other half of the Garage Kept Motors duo, AJ and Jeremy. So check that out as well. These guys, you'll find them at Verburg Automotive, some place in Cascade, Michigan. Cascade and Thornapple River Drive. You can look them up there. We need to have your pictures on the wall with the podcast. We got to work on that. I want to make sure everybody knows that this is where the AutoTalk Podcast is. We got to get.
And yours is going up as well, right?
I'll be this fine print in the corner. We'll leave it at that.
Okay.
And until next time, that puts the wraps on episode 52. Check us out on Facebook, Michigan's AutoTalk Podcast, facebook.com/Michigan's AutoTalk. I'm producer Phil Tower.
I'm Al Schwinkendorf.
I'm John Puhek. Thanks for listening.